dairy digesters enable the conversion of methane into biogas, meeting on-farm energy needs and creating byproducts. By harnessing this biogas, agricultural operations not only abate greenhouse gas emissions, but also utilize renewable energy sources, reducing their environmental footprint. The implementation of these systems presents an opportunity to significantly contribute to overall emissions reductions within the agriculture sector while promoting sustainable practices and energy efficiency. Our first panel will explore the role of digester technologies in mitigating agricultural waste and greenhouse gas emissions from livestock production. It is my pleasure to welcome Rick Naerebout, Chief Executive Officer of Idaho Dairymen's Association, who will moderate our first panel. Take care.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you, Governor Gordon. I appreciate you having this be your initiative. I think we pride ourselves in Idaho and the Intermountain West on practical solutions, and this is an issue when you look at greenhouse gas reductions or decarbonization, that us as a U.S. dairy industry, we've set ourselves a net zero goal in 2050 to be carbon neutral. And so to have Western governors look at this and weigh in with practical solutions and a practical voice, I think is very helpful for producers in this region. So we're going to start today. I'm going to give you a brief overview of just Idaho's dairy industry. I think that helps give you a perspective when we start talking about decarbonization and methane digesters. And then we'll have each of the panelists introduce themselves and share a little bit about what they're doing in this space. And then we'll work through questions and answers that we have prepared for them, and then spend about 15 minutes with the audience doing a Q&A as well. So to start with, just to give you a little bit of a snapshot about Idaho's dairy industry, partially because I'm not going to let you come to Idaho and moderate a panel and not talk about my industry. So we are the nation's third largest dairy state when it comes to milk production. Texas likes to claim they're going to pass us, but they've yet to actually successfully pass us for more than maybe a 1 or 2 month stint. So we still, in Idaho, are the third largest. We really have 3 milk sheds in the state. The largest by far is the Magic Valley. That's going to be really centered around Twin Falls. It's about 120 miles southeast of here. That's where I live, and about 80% of the industry is centered around Twin Falls and in that Magic Valley area. And there we've got about 237 dairies, just shy of 525,000 cows, and an average herd size of 2,200 cows per dairy, so a fairly large herd size. Treasure Valley, that's the valley in this part of the state that you're in here, in and around Boise. Really looks a lot like the Magic Valley, a little smaller herd size, but you typically have about 20% of the dairies and 20% of the cows here. You know, they're averaging about 2,000 cows per dairy in this part of the state. And then we have eastern Idaho, where you've got a lot smaller herd size. And East Idaho really looks like the Midwest. I grew up in the Midwest. The industry over there looks a lot like the Midwest. We've got about 20% of the dairymen, but only about 4% of the cows. So your herd size is much smaller there compared to the rest of the country. But probably noteworthy to highlight that 445 cows per dairy is still larger than the national average when it comes to average herd size for dairies. So what's that look like in terms of operation by size? And we still have a number of dairies that are going to be what we qualify as smaller. So if you look at those top 2 rows, you've got 27% of the herds are still going to be 500 cows or smaller. But as you work your way down that chart, and for this conversation, really the place to focus are going to be those dairies that are 2,000 cows and larger. Because when you start to look at a technology like methane digesters, realistically in Idaho, you've got to be milking 5,000 cows, probably really 7,000 to 10,000 cows to be in a serious conversation about having a digester work for your facility. So really that's going to be kind of the focal point. Is this is a conversation around those larger facilities that have enough slurry manure to make these technologies viable and economical into the long run. So milk production, we continue to grow milk production year over year. This is, credit to a state that is very friendly to agricultural industries. We've only had 2 years in the last 30 where we haven't grown our milk production in Idaho, and that's been 2009 and 2013. And both those years were really tough financial years for our dairy producers. So we're a continual growth industry, which makes us attractive when you look at trying to bring in digester developers that want to work in these projects. They know that we've got staying power when it comes to growth of our industry and the ability to support the investments that they're looking to make. And then our dairy processors, we really Like the dairies, we have very large processors. And if you look at this list is organized by the amount of milk that they run. And you're probably going to struggle to recognize a lot of the names on this list. Probably the most notable name is going to be Chobani. They're the 8th largest processor here in the state. We are a high volume, low margin industry, and we run at scale, and our processing industry is no different. The top 11 processors in that list run 95% of the milk in the state. And so we're very dependent on large processors that are very efficient doing what they do and running a lot of milk day in, day out. And then lastly, our economic contribution. Just a few stats out there, and really this is just looking at the milk and meat production that we have in the dairy industry. Arguably going forward, and especially after today's conversation, we probably need to start looking at capturing the renewable energy perspective of what we do as a dairy industry going forward, because you'll learn there's some pretty significant investments going on in this space, and we probably don't do ourselves justice by not capturing that additional economic activity created from renewable energy sources. So that just gives you a little bit of perspective on Idaho's dairy industry. And then is there any particular order that I have up here, Abby?
Just go across.
Go across, all right. So I will hand it off to Jess Burson with Shell Oil, and he'll provide a little bit of perspective of what Shell's up to here in the state.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Like Rick said, my name is Jesse Burson. I work for Shell. It does feel kind of strange to have oil and gas company being here speaking to you about decarbonization, but to us, we are no longer just the oil and gas company that you think of when you fill up your car. Really, we're heading towards our goal of being a net zero emissions company by 2050, aligned with our partners here. And that we're really believing in that commitment. And how we're going to do that is by providing more value with less emissions. So when you think about your customers and how they want to go forward, you hear a lot about this demand. So there's a demand out there for people wanting to reduce their carbon emissions. So, but they don't know how do we do that? I don't know. So that's where Shell comes in. We have a very large customer reach. So we go and we talk with customers like Waste Management, the City of Los Angeles, LA Metro, and we say, look, we have upstream all the way through the value chain, and we can deliver a renewable natural gas product to you at your facility, and then you can reduce your carbon emissions. I look forward into the future, and we say, okay, well, how does that work? How does the life cycle of a dairy digester project work? So we've partnered with pretty large-scale dairies here in Idaho, the Bentoncourt dairies, but we've also partnered with dairies in Kansas, such as the High Plains Ponderosa dairy, and we've also have a facility in Oregon, in Junction City, that does a co-digestion product. These facilities take anaerobic digestion, which is very similar to a cow's stomach. We then upgrade the gas, put it into the pipeline, and send it down to our customers who are requesting the product. This can be from heavy haul transport, or this can be your consumer fleet vehicles, or it can go into utilities who are ever present in this market saying, we would like to sell more renewable natural gas as part of our offering to our customers. So I think that's how we're trying to meet those goals that these companies have, and our goal to provide more and cleaner energy solutions for our customers and for our shareholders as part of the value proposition. So when I said we have investment in Idaho, I'm not just talking about $50 million. We've made a commitment in Idaho of over $200 million in just 2 projects in the Magic Valley. So these projects will come online here in the next year. And as you can see, they look a whole lot like gas plants. So Shell has a lot of experience and operations of running gas plants kind of across the world. And so this kind of fits in our bread and butter of what things that we can do to help decarbonize dairies, but also help decarbonize industries that are just in the neighboring area. So if I think about, if I'm a dairyman and my goal is to decarbonize and meet the Idaho Dairymen's goal of being net zero emissions by 2050, I say, well, let me look across what I have. And I have a large haul feed fleet. I have operations of all producing the milk. How do I reduce those carbon emissions? And one way to do that is just by using the gas that's already present at your dairy farm. Oh, there was a slide missing there. Okay, well, I was going to show you We recently made an acquisition of Nature Energy. It's a Denmark company. They have about 14 plants in operation in Denmark. And what the real point of that is co-digestion, we believe, is the future for renewable natural gas. Right now, the manure monodigestion facilities are the ones that capture the most credits in the value chain right now. But we believe that by just adding 10% more food waste or agricultural waste, you can drive up a lot more renewable natural gas and provide a much cleaner energy product for customers downstream. It is disincentivized because the credits at a D5 versus a D3 EPA RINs are actually discounted when you compare the two. So it's actually disincentivized to do co-digestion, and that's kind of what we're seeking, and what we've tried to lobby is we need to change the ruling so that more players can come online, do co-digestion, bring on more renewable natural gas, reduce food waste, organic waste from going to landfills, and it's really a win-win proposition. So, you know, I apologize, but the slide would show you that at an industrial scale, you can have 25 to 50 dairies trucking in manure, providing that manure, that feedstock, and that really then changes the game when it comes to the economics of these projects. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jess. Appreciate that. And then next up, we have Andre Brasil with CalBio. And I will say these guys have a lot of experience in this space and are one of the pioneers when it comes to digester development in California. So.
Thanks, Rick. Like Rick said, my name is Andre Brasil. I'm with California BioEnergy, also known as CalBio. And basically, my role at CalBio is I am the project pipeline generator. And in doing so, we've been pretty successful, like Rick had mentioned. We have about 54 operating projects, dairy digester projects in California. We've been expanding across the country. We're in construction in South Dakota. We have some dairy farm families that we've partnered with in Idaho. And it's kind of unique for me. I grew up in the dairy business back home. That's how I got involved with CalBio and building a digester on my family's dairy. And now in doing this, it's been great to see that we've been able to expand to so many other farming families and help them decarbonize. And it's really great to be here. It's great to hear, Rick, what you're trying to achieve here in Idaho. In California, the state set a goal to reduce manure methane emissions by 40% by 2030, I believe it was. That's about 4 million metric tons of CO2 equivalents. CalBio on its own has reduced roughly 1.2 million metric tons of CO2 equivalents, and the dairy digester industry in California has reduced roughly 2.3 million metric tons of CO2 equivalents. So I'm eager and excited to get going on the panel, talk about some of the barriers and how we can really generate some more activity here in the western states. Thanks.
And then last up is a gentleman that I am not as familiar with, John Olshefski. And hey, I've got a last name that's Naerebout, so I got to try and figure out how to say other guys' last names. So, John, please provide us some of your thoughts.
Well, this first slide is just catch your attention. I'm a retired Army colonel, so one of the ways you ever said to anybody was you had to catch their attention right out of the box. I'm throwing that up there, and you see CalFart bus, and you go, wow. And I don't do digesters. I'm learning more about digesters. Well, we love digesters because we named our whole process after CalFart bus, more to follow. So I hope I got a little laugh out of that. Okay. I am John Olshefski. I'm a retired Army colonel, and my last job in the Army was Garrison Commander Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama, the largest city now in the state of Alabama per capita. And you'd probably say, really? Montgomery, Birmingham. Well, yeah, we're now the largest. At my last job, I commanded over 3,000 folks, mostly all civilians. And you say, well, what's a garrison commander in English? That is, I got selected to be a colonel and selected for this job, whereas you don't become a mayor. And we really called it the mayor of Redstone Arsenal, unless you're elected. But I also did 27 years there, and then I moved on to 10 years at Huntsville Utilities. And my job was senior VP for customer care. So I'm all into the customer care. So like this hotel, I don't know about you all, but there's some pretty cool features here. and it's things I pick up on, like the ice and the little thing where you put your food out and you don't have to worry about laying it out in the hallway. And I always said, it always looks so crappy, and here they answered it. So I'm a customer care kind of guy. I am also past chair this year of American Public Gas Association. So my newest friend over here, he's in D.C., and this association's a lobbyist, and we represented 1,000 municipalities in the country in natural gas. I was doing that for a year, and the renewable piece really didn't hit me in the nose until I went to work for Ingevity. And Ingevity's a company that I'll get into, but my theme when I was the chairman was freedom to fuel. And I'm so excited this is a bipartisan crowd here today, because I've been talking to all my world, and we all talk about the importance of natural gas and never going away, and it needs to be here forever. But we're always talking to ourselves. We're never talking to the people that maybe don't agree with us. And so it's nice to be in a crowd that will get some questions. And so why freedom to fuel? I chose freedom to fuel because I fought in 2 wars. And when I fought in the 2 wars, I always thought to myself, I fought for freedom, right? And here I am in my own country, and somebody's trying to tell me I got to electrify. And I struggle with that. But you know what? I got a saying. It's called disagreement doesn't equal disrespect. And I will tell you that is so powerful. And if we have a part of our country, or part of a place called Washington, D.C., if they could learn a little bit of that, we might be there. That's my politics for the day. And I was a city councilman, and my brothers over there asked me, why did you get out of it? And I don't want to be wimpy on you, but I have to admit, what I struggled about was the fact I got tired of my integrity getting attacked. And I didn't even do anything. And it just kept attacked, and after 4 years, I said enough, and I'm going to do something else. But I paid my dues. I got beat up enough. So I appreciate those great Americans that go and fight that fight. So what is Ingevity? It's a multi-billion-dollar company, and you're saying, so what? It is a good company, and the company, what it is, it's all about the carbon. Every car in the United States of America that you put when you're out there putting your gas in, there's not a lot of old people. There's not a lot of older people in there. This is a younger crowd. A lot of people in this room probably have never seen fumes and smell come out of the tank. Well, ever since this company called Ingevity got involved, it was something else before, but they got involved. There's a black box on every one of these cars, and when you stick it in there, it's got carbon strips and carbon cylinders in there to take all that garbage out. And so why are we, that's our name, we're all about getting the carbon out as well, so we believe in that. I wanted to say that we are now making it, there's only so much, and they're looking for something else, and they got involved in the importance of the supply of RNG. And you'll say, well, what's the big deal? And I'll get to that. And then we believe use it as an in-use, a transportation platform. And so I'll get to that. And we got it in a niche environment. And I say municipalities and utilities, those great Americans work from 6 o'clock in the morning to about 3 o'clock. And then when they're done in the day, if they got Ford 150s or Ford 250, we have technology that we can add a natural gas tank on the back of it and run that vehicle for 100 miles a day and not use a lick of regular gas. And you all know price points on natural gas. It's about $1. So it's a lot cheaper, $1 per equivalent gallon. So it's a lot cheaper in the big scheme of things. But guess what you don't have? And I'll get to this later real quick here. I'm 3 minutes now, I think. I used to be able to do that really well. And I'm going to get into this. This is our bus. And one of the technologies we're trying to do is we put on the bottom of a school bus a tank. And it actually blends natural gas with diesel. So at $1 per equivalent gallon, once again, y'all, you get 100 miles extra a day, and this whole process, no effect on your engine, get a little more, got a cleaner air environment, all the above. We say the word renewable natural gas, and you guys understand this, but it'll come in a minute. The big pitch is, I got asked today, it's about $25,000 to 2 vehicles and get an appliance. Some of you are familiar with CNG stations, I'm sure. There are $500 to $1 million items. Our appliance feeds 2 vehicles. It's $5,000. And it's low pressure. Instead of 3,000 PSI, it's 900 PSI. That's a good story. And so it takes 3 to 4 hours to fill up 2 vehicles. And they're going home, so the thing plugs in and it works just fine. Why am I saying all this? You look at the chart. We can do 26 vehicles inside doing 1 electric school bus. 26 vehicles, just Think about that for a second. And renewable natural gas. Going on again. Ultra clean natural gas, low carbon solution reduces greenhouse gas 80%. Fleet pays utility rate for natural gas, no incremental cost for RNG. I just read that to you, and I'm sorry for doing that because they used to drive me nuts when the guys used to do that to me. And then the last, it's about 20 cents. So if you go this route with RNG and you had 150s and 250s in your inventory, or you had school buses in your place that was using the digester and taking the methane to renewable natural gas, there's a lot of wins in that. And you guys are a lot smarter than I am. I'm just trusting you are, and there's a lot more on it. I already gave the price, and the CNG station already did that too. And I'm getting down to 1 minute. Here's one comment I made to these great gentlemen here. No range anxiety. Electric school bus, you got range anxiety. Propane, you have range anxiety. Natural gas, renewable natural gas in our vehicles or the school bus, no range anxiety. Runs out of the natural gas, it just goes to diesel. So I can get 500 miles on a diesel school bus, reckon y'all with me. It's a pretty good deal. And enhanced, I don't need to read that. And no compromise. That's come up a few times. They're concerned about the engines. Most of the vehicles we've been putting is already out of warranty anyway, so it doesn't matter. This is a chart that I've kind of already talked to. It's much cheaper to do the Demi Neufeul. Neufeul is the small company under Ingevity, company Demi, who is helping us with the school bus platform. The chart's there. You can see it, and I don't need to brief a bunch of smart people a chart. And kind of cool. We're actually got school buses right now in Eagle County and Colorado, so they're already here. And that's enough. I think enough damage I've done. Talking about everything but dead digesters. So sorry about that, but I can talk digesters too. Thank you.
Left the page back now. Okay, thanks. Thank you, John. So going to spend a little bit of time here. We've got seated the panel with a few questions, so they didn't come in completely cold. I want to work through a couple of those, and then we'll turn it over to audience questions and get some interaction from the audience here too, because I think that's going to be probably the most useful part of our time. But so looking at offset, offtake markets, LCFS markets, how does that help create the opportunity for your projects, and how does it help make your projects go? So maybe we'll just start with Jess and work our way down the line, and maybe share a little bit about how those markets help make this all work.
Yeah, I think for our projects, we look at it in terms of where is the risk best placed. And why I bring up risk is because when you look at these economics of these projects, the voluntary credit market prices have been fluctuating considerably. When we took the financial investment decision for the two projects that I showed up on the screen, I think the LCFS credit price was right around $200. Today, I think it's trading around 80, somewhere less. So you can see there's a huge swing there. So we decided as a business, because we're in the business, we can trade credits very well. We have a really large trading arm. We know how to place gas very well. We took that opportunity to say, look, Mr. Betancourt, we don't believe that you are in the best position to really handle those swings, that risk. We will partner with you for a much longer period of time. We'll take that credit risk, the ups and the downs, as long as you provide us the feedstock as part of this agreement that we're going to go in with you. And so I think when I look at how can we make that system a little bit better, Shell has always been a proponent of carbon markets. So whether that's voluntary or that's regulated by the state or federal governments, but we see where there's a demand from people and companies, businesses that want to be able to trade carbon credits with others that offset a certain amount of CO2 per ton. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to be driven by the state government. It doesn't have to be driven by the federal government. It can be a voluntary credit market where businesses come together to reduce their carbon emissions by people showing up as producers as well as people that are showing up as off-takers.
Okay, so I mean, really, offsets create all the economic value that make these technologies possible. So you have the low carbon fuel standard, as Jesse mentioned, in California, which has been extremely successful in driving projects across the country. You also have the renewable fuel standard with the EPA at the federal level. But outside of that, there's some new markets. There's the clean fuel standard in Oregon and the clean fuels program that's starting up in Washington. But outside of that, there's not many markets for projects like these. There will be others in development, potentially in the hydrogen space. The LCFS program has generated a pathway for electric vehicle fuels, which we've built some electric generation projects. And the E-RIN has not yet come at the federal level with the EPA, potentially the next set rule. But basically, to drive more opportunity, we need more markets, we need more variability, we need more optionality. And it doesn't just have to be the blue states that are coming up with these markets. It'd be great to see Idaho or Texas or Montana come up with something to help drive growth within these western states.
That's highly ambitious for some red states.
I know, but worth mentioning.
Well,
John, how about you?
I don't have a lot to add there, except I was going to, you're way ahead of me. I think all the states ought to be looking at it. And so, for instance, example, my guys, when I was asking some of these questions when I was back home, they said, you know, you put a system in and you don't have the capability to get rid of the natural gas. You got to take it to one of those other states. Well, the cost is so prohibitive to get to the other state. You need to be looking at trying to do some in-house. And then the in-house factor was my company, with our vehicles we're trying to do, is a great place to do it in-house and do it in your own state without having to run lines over to the other states that have it. So I didn't understand that until you guys sent me these questions. When I started asking all our smart guys, they just said everybody in every state ought to be looking at that. And that's the niceness of being in a partisan group today.
Yeah. So the LCFS markets definitely create opportunity, but it can't all be roses. So what are some of the barriers that the structure that we're operating within, what are the barriers that are present there?
You want to take the first one?
Sure. So one of the barriers, like Jesse mentioned, is really low market prices. So we started out really high, $200, $190 a metric ton when we first started building a lot of our projects, and now we're trading around somewhere between $70 and $80. D3 RINs, which dairy digesters qualify for, those are way up. They're over $3 an ethanol gallon equivalent. But some of the barriers, especially on the LCFS side, is low credit market prices, and we need longer crediting, is low credit market prices, so we need higher credit prices. We also need longer crediting periods. We're all anticipating CARB scoping plan, which should come out this month, so we can see what their plans are for dairy digesters in California, and that also impacts dairy digesters across the country. They're using book and claim to get gas to California into fleets. So everyone's got eyes on them to see what's going to happen, and really to make these projects even work. Now we're getting into a point Rick mentioned earlier that we have such large dairies that make it more feasible to build these projects, and as those dairies start to develop projects, the dairies start to get smaller and smaller and smaller, yet more reductions are needed, more decarbonization is needed. So to make projects more feasible for those smaller dairy farms, we need longer crediting periods, we need higher market prices, we need additional markets to drive opportunity and competition. So that's what I'll say on that.
Yeah, I think for us, the CARB set rule coming up has really caused a lot of concern within our organization. I think the idea of you need to prove that the gas flows to California, kind of similar to what they've proposed in the RFS, it really locks out a lot of potential opportunities in the western states, right? I kind of this past year been working on this project trying to figure out how can we basically get an export line to push gas into the Williams Northwest Natural Pipeline so that we can send gas, to the western states where these programs are involved. I mean, we got to where we were surveying how do we cross the Snake River at a cost of about $20 million, and it just doesn't make sense. So, having ways to kind of break down some of those barriers when it comes into the natural gas pipeline system, barriers of kind of hooking up, whether electricity grid system. I mean, there's just a lot of infrastructure support that needs to happen to make these projects work. Thankfully, Intermountain Gas did get their FERC blanket certificate this past November 3rd. That will allow them to then inject into that pipeline, unlocking several more dairy digester projects. But it's things like that that make it very challenging for projects to go forward, because there's just such amount of risk involved when you don't really know what the credit market regulatory body is going to tell you what you're going to have to do next.
Way above my pay grade there.
So, going a little bit off script on this one, but Andre mentioned the ERIN system at a federal level, and curious, and we'll start with you, John, on this question. If the federal government did stand up a ERIN system where they're going to incentivize electrical production over RNG production, how might that impact your business and the projects that you guys have going?
Significantly. First of all, I'm always amazed how they want to take care of the electric and they don't want to do anything with us. I'm always amazed at that. We have such a great value in what we have to offer in the gas space. But one of the comments that was made to me just the other day when I was doing my research on this was we have the ability through our vehicles to help out in the RINs and the credits and all the above, but there's no incentivization for people. The incentivization is to go electric and everything, and we're going to be significantly impacted if they go the other route, or they don't help incentivize. Now, I say all that to say we just applied for a grant for a local, one of our companies that we're supporting, Eagle County, and for the school bus deal. But my point is, that's the first grant that we've ever been able to take on. So the federal government is, I think, at least trying to help us in our space, if that makes any sense, whereas they had not historically. And we would be impacted if it the other way, significantly.
So we'll just work down the line there, Andre.
So to add what John's saying is, renewable natural gas is a really important transition fuel. At the federal level, there's a push for electrification, and then at the state level in California, there's a big push for electrification. But there's a lot of issues there with are EV trucks going to be ready in time? Is the grid going to be ready? Which to some they would say is a long shot. So it's really tough to see all that electrification and knowing how important renewable natural gas is as a transitionary fuel. And it's kind of about lining up when is electrification feasible, and then setting up these crediting programs to match up with that timeline to also benefit these dairy digester projects and the good work that's happening now. And on the ERIN side, I think the question was how would it impact us? For us, it would definitely increase project development. It would increase opportunity to a lot of dairies that are isolated. Usually for our RNG projects, we build digesters on multiple dairies and then biogas lines collecting the biogas to a centralized location where we remove the CO2 and inject into the utility pipeline. Our electricity projects that we've created today have been at standalone dairies where we're using an internal combustion engine or a fuel cell. And next year we'll be implementing our first linear generator. And in doing that, we're able to build a project for a standalone dairy, generate LCFS credits. We're able to net meter and offset the dairy's utility bill, including demand charges and things like that because of on-site generation. So it's actually a huge win for dairymen, especially in California, where we're paying 18 to 20 cents a kilowatt hour sometimes. And so, but without RINs, you need a big dairy to pull that off. We've built one on a 10,000 cow dairy, 5,000 cow dairy, things like that. But with ERINs, that kind of brings into play the isolated standalone 2,000 cow dairies, 2,500 cow dairies. And so for us, it would lead to more project development. For dairy farmers, I know for sure in California, it would lead to more accessibility into being able to achieve economic and environmental sustainability through digesters.
Yeah, for us, I mean, we see it as our Powering Progress strategy is we want to produce more energy and cleaner, right? So for us, it doesn't matter if it's electricity, natural gas, we're going to provide what the customer is really looking for. And what's so nice about renewable natural gas is it's a fungible molecule. You can put it into a pipeline, you can send it down, you can then turn it into electricity, you can turn it into hydrogen, you can turn it into marine fuel, you can turn it into, there's a lot of different avenues where you can place this molecule that then decarbonizes that sector. And I think for us, we just need to be given the direction of where governments would like the molecules to go. That will help us then say, okay, we then will build more dairy to electricity projects. We'll then look for opportunities to line up customers that want to electrify their fleets. We'll sit there and say, well, okay, how about decarbonizing just local consumers that want to reduce their utility consumption and emissions by selling it into the grid system, and they use it in boilers, or they can then put it through their own turbine generators. So I think there's a little bit of the infrastructure piece, like I mentioned, but I think there's also too about just setting a good course and then sticking with it.
Rick, I'd like to just add one thing. And this is what this place is all about. It's all about digesters for agriculture and dairy. I get it, but we have landfills, we have sewage plants, and we have the pig industry, all play in the same space. So I just throwing this out as we got to lock arms. A digester's a digester, to my opinion, in all of them, but we all are trying to make renewable natural gas out of it. And so my point is, as an old Army guy, we don't want to take this fight on by ourselves. Let's grab our other brothers and sisters that are in this fight trying to do landfills and all that. Because like my company has done landfills. Yep. We don't have any this world yet, but we have done landfills. I leave it at that. Thanks.
Yeah. So, and this is more of a digester-centric question, the credit schemes that are there. And right now there's uncertainty. Shell Oil is partnered with Betancourt Dairies. Everybody's looking at that project as a good thing. And you have the same thing with your Cal Bio facilities. Who gets credit for that project? And what are some of the barriers or problems with that credit scheme?
Yeah, so it's interesting, Brett, that recently Nestle has been one of the companies that said, no, those credits ought to stay with the milk producers and we should be staying with the dairymen. And our view is that that's really more of a commercial agreement between whoever does the dairy project and who owns the dairy. So I think there's probably some differing opinions there. And so I think that will be kind of sorted out, but I think that should really be between two parties who are in the agreement together. That's what I'll say about that.
Yeah.
It's tough. To make these projects economic, you have to sell these credits to obligated parties who are required to purchase them. That's kind of how you make it all work. But dairies need some form of credit or be able to claim those reductions themselves, even though that sale is happening. Because you can't have one without the other. That's why it's a successful program, is because it's helping the dairy industry become environmentally sustainable. And then and it's economically viable because of the way the program operates. There's other inset opportunities with credits on the voluntary market, generating credits on farm and then selling them to processors and things like that, so it stays within the supply chain. So that is kind of one of the age-old questions in this young industry, is how does that function? Where does it go? For now, you have to sell it to the obligated party because that's how everything operates.
And I will tell you that conversation is one we could literally spend hours on.
Yeah.
Because you do have Nestle and other major food brands out there pushing to try and keep all these credits within the supply chain. But the reality is Nestle's not writing Betancourt Dairies a $200 million check to build a project with them. And so there's this give and take right now within the food production industry of who should get credit for this. Can the dairy claim the reduction even though Shell Oil made the investment? And the reality is, I love Andre's point, we can't exist without each other. We need each other to make this work. And so we've got to find a credit scheme and an accounting metrics that will continue to incentivize. And I think that's what America gets right, is we are very much taking an incentive-based approach to trying to decarbonize as opposed to a punitive approach, is what we see in the dairy industry in New Zealand and the European Union. So I think that's one thing that we are getting right. So looking at the cost of all these projects, and again, we'll start with you, John, on this one. You know, what incentives are there to try and make these projects feasible? And if there's not a good incentive there, what do you think is needed to try and facilitate more project development and, you know, really speed up the rate of adoption of your different practices and technologies?
Well, in fairness, all I've done is landfill. So, but I'll try to do it in this way. I've learned from everybody wins at a landfill that's municipality ran. The municipality gets money out of it. The guy who developed it gets money out of it, and the user gets, the user gets some support from it. And we just had a meeting with our mayor, and not our mayor, but our utility guy who's picked by the mayor to oversee this landfill ordeal, and the win for us was we had 25, 35 million. Now we're talking not 200 million. 25, 35 million. If they don't have that kind of cash, then they get some royalties, but they don't get as much. If they meet it halfway, they get more, and then they get the. I'm not smart as Andre here and you guys on these RINs, but there's RIN credits involved in all of that as well. So when we're talking a $25, $35 million investment in a landfill, it's a lot different than this $200 million. But we see that everybody wins in it, which very rarely does everybody win. And I'm seeing that as a benefit. Now, why is they winning? Then the municipality that uses the natural gas in their Ford 150s or their Ford 250s, they're winning on that because they're getting a break on their gas, and they can save a bunch of money on that. And then if the school buses are in that same realm, they get breaks on that as well. I hope I helped answer that question.
Well, and maybe with your school bus conversions, is there something that would help additional districts be able to make that conversion? Is there some sort of incentive program that might be able to help that program be adopted wider?
Well, first of all, we're in a pilot program right now with the school systems. We actually allow them to try this for 6 to 9 months totally free, and then if they decide not to use it, they just give it back. And but I'm also talking about something very reasonable price in the big scheme of things. When we were doing CNG, we were talking $500,000 to $1 million to build a fueling station. Now we're talking $5,000 for a fueling station, and it's not any bigger than this chair. Is that an incentive? No, but the price is cheap. It's reasonable. It's something to get our arms around at municipalities and at utilities, whereas before. And our market really is that, but I could also see us going after an Amazon if they had a boatload of Ford 150s and 250s in the same process. I hope I'm making sense on that.
I would piggyback on what John said. It's about creating win-win opportunities. The easiest way for a dairy farmer to get involved in a project like this is to partner with a developer. Because as a developer, we can build a project at no cost to a dairy farmer, and we share the cash flows. And majority of our partners actually have equity positions in our projects as well. And so we always open that opportunity out to our dairy farmers also. That's the easiest way to go about it because these projects are expensive. There's some funding opportunities specifically to California. The California Department of Food and Agriculture has their DDRDP program, which funds digesters. And then they also have the Alternative Manure Management Program, which helps fund projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions without digesters. And then there's, at the USDA level, there's NRCS EQIP funding. There's the Renewable Energy for America program and other programs. And the Inflation Reduction Act has actually been instrumental in generating the investment tax credit and the production tax credit, which is seriously helping finance projects and build projects and make projects more economic. So we need more opportunities like this, right? and especially as we start to get to a world where we're dealing with smaller scale farms. But to that note, even with all these opportunities, these are still multi-million-dollar projects, you know, and if you're running a 2,000 cow farm, a multi-million-dollar project isn't something you might be so eager to take on. So for me, I feel like the best way to enter into a digester project would be to partner with a developer.
Yeah, and I think that's how we see it too. I think, you know, you can't, it's really difficult to do this on your own. And maybe that's a problem with the system, but it's very challenging for just a dairyman or landfill developer to do this by themselves, right? So I think there's going to be more opportunity to do this, what they call a hub and spoke model, where, you know, you have a centralized location where you can process a lot of different wastes, whether that's fats, oil, and greases, whether that's manure, whether that's food waste. But the idea there is having a facility that can basically process a lot of different materials is going to be more beneficial to both digester health, but also produces more gas and produces more energy for the system. And so that's how we see that you can kind of make these projects a little bit more economical, is by being able to kind of produce more gas using different and I guess optionality, we've heard that before, is providing more optionality to the feedstocks.
Thank you all. So we're going to spend about 15 minutes here and open it up to the audience to ask audience questions of these guys. So who wants to go first? Yes, right there. Oh, we got a mic coming. Sorry, I forgot we're online.
Thanks. Ashley Conrad Seda with Vibrant Planet, but I was with the state of California for many years and worked on multiple scoping plans. So it's really good to hear how much the cap and trade benefits are helping you. And a lot of the funds that Andre was talking about in California do come from cap and trade auction proceeds, and that Shell takes advantage of too. So I just, with that in mind, hearing both the challenges and the opportunities you're talking about, it sounds like potentially a national price on carbon with a national market would actually incentivize a lot of these programs that you're talking about. And I just wanted to hear some reflections on that, at least getting a price on carbon or potentially creating markets for the other ecosystem benefits that you get from these programs would actually provide more revenue for you to do more of these projects on the ground. And so could you comment on your interest as an organization in seeing more of a national market-based approach, and especially for Shell, you could avoid some of those long pipelines, and B, what your organizations are doing to advocate for these types of programs at the national level?
Can I take that one? Because I mean, our CEO has been very vocal about this. He really believes that the carbon market is the best option for kind of more development in this space. And to your point, I mean, we have focused primarily in Idaho and in the western states because of the LCFS credit market, right? If it is at a national scale or level, then that opens up a lot of opportunities in the southeast. It opens up a lot of opportunities in the Midwest. And Northeast, for that matter. So those are areas and hubs of large farms and large agricultural areas that would benefit from a national carbon market.
Yeah, I agree with Jesse. I think a national market would be great. It'd open up a lot more opportunities across the country, and you wouldn't see, an influx of fuels heading to California and draining that market. So I would agree.
By me.
From a dairy producer perspective, I'd be curious to explore what the unintended consequences of that are. You look at, we in Idaho absolutely benefit from California's go-it-alone LCFS marketplace. We're not paying the higher energy prices for that, because ultimately California has higher energy prices and energy costs than we do in Idaho. So we'd be real curious from an Idaho dairyman's perspective to know what's the downside to that equation.
Or the upside of increased supply, right?
Yeah, does the upside offset the downside? Yeah, but so far we like California's go-it-alone way. Other questions out there? I knew you'd have one, Jonathan. I was waiting for the hand to come up.
You can count on me, Rick. Thanks, Jonathan Oppenheimer with the Idaho Conservation League. I think it was you, Jesse, that was talking about some of the alternate products or the diversity of products that can come from some biodigester products or projects. Wondering if you could just speak to those a little bit, some of the fertilizer and bedding, and how that comes into the supply chain.
Absolutely. So after we process the manure, what comes out, we call it digestate, right? So that digestate has basically stripped out a lot of the volatile solids, so it can be used as cow bedding. We also can be used as fertilizer. The liquid stream that is removed from that can be used in land applied as another fertilizer. And take that a step further, I think in the technology space, other companies are coming online with wastewater treatment kind of projects that will even further benefit the industry by stripping out even higher concentrations of nitrates, phosphates, and then being able to then transport those into locations that need those minerals for better soil health, right? So I think as we look forward, there's going to be more opportunity to kind of place minerals not just in the local environment, but in across the United States and beyond.
So to add to that, for us, very similar. For our covered lagoon digesters, it's pre-digester. For these tank digesters that we build, sometimes it's post-digester. But we separate the fiber, and that fiber's recycled and dried to kill the bacteria, and it's used as bedding for the cows on these dairy farms. And then post-digester, what we're doing in California is we've actually built these real-time irrigation systems. So our farmers can irrigate immediately after the digester with the effluent onto their fields. The nutrient levels in the digester stay the same, but the nitrogen actually transforms from organic nitrogen to inorganic nitrogen, and it has increased crop uptake. And so there's one farmer in particular that we partnered with to really see if we can pull this off, and it worked. But he hasn't bought a pound of commercial fertilizer since he did this, because he's able to get the digester effluent strategically to different parts of his ranch, and making sure that that available nitrogen is getting to his crops as quickly as possible. And it's also saved him a buck, and it's also decreased fossil fuel fertilizer.
So a couple good points in there. One, the NP and K going into these digesters is the same as the NP and K coming out. Often digesters are confused as some sort of nutrient management technology, and the reality is it's slurry manure in, slurry manure out, and then you've got to bolt on different manure separation technologies to get to the different products that these gentlemen are describing. Andre, you also touched on digester design, and maybe walk the group through, you in California can do a covered lagoon digester, whereas that design really doesn't work in your colder climate. So maybe walk through some of the different designs and where they do and don't work.
Yeah, so for us in California, it's more cost effective to build a covered lagoon digester because you don't have to heat it. And so the operational expenses are also lower. But basically, it's a double-lined lagoon with a lysimeter pan so we can check for leaks underneath each liner. And then there's baffle walls in the middle, so the digester effluent can flow kind of like a lazy river to maximize gas production. And there's also concrete ballast over the top of these covered lagoons so that the biogas can travel in the same manner. We have some mixer ports in there for agitation. And one of the big local pollutants is hydrogen sulfide, which is really dangerous. You kind of hear those horror stories sometimes when a farmer passes away from working on a floating pump in a lagoon or something like that. And underneath the cover, that hydrogen sulfide can get really strong and very concentrated. And so we actually inject air under the cover through our mixer port, just a small amount of air, and it activates a certain bacteria that eats on that hydrogen sulfide at a bulk level. Then from there, we have a vacuum pipe around one end of the digester that vacuums the biogas out of the digester into what we call a conditioning plant that we build on site next to the digester. And there, we're removing the hydrogen sulfide, the remaining hydrogen sulfide, through an iron sponge unit or a sulfasorb unit, and then we dewater and compress at a low pressure and send it to the central hub where we remove the CO2 and then inject into the pipeline. So the first step was the covered lagoon digester, And then what we're building in South Dakota is continuously stirred tank reactors. They're made out of concrete. They're really big. You got an auger on the inside that's stirring basically vacuum slurry. In California, it's hot. A lot of those dairies are operating on automated flush systems, and so they're already dumping manure into lagoons to be used as irrigation. And so you're basically just getting on the front end of that and digesting that wastewater. And so when you get into colder climates, you need to build something that can heat the digester. And so there's plug flows, which I'm less familiar with. But on the tank side, there's CSTRs, and you have an auger in the middle. You have a membrane cover on top that captures the gas. And it's vacuum manure that goes in, and then often you're separating afterwards with a screw press or something like that. And then you're heating it usually with a boiler. And yeah, I don't know if Jesse wants to add anything on to.
No, I mean, the only difference, I think we just have H2S scrubbers that knock it out, and then we have a membrane system that purifies the gas to get it to pipeline quality specification, but everything else is pretty much the same.
Thank you. Seth Snyder, Idaho National Lab. 2 questions related to the economics. On the fugitive emissions of methane, you know, there's an upside, an economic upside to doing the capturing, so you better manure management. But there's a downside that you're going to have to do much tighter monitoring to make sure you don't have fugitive emissions. And that's going to balance whether you're going to credit for D3 and others. So, you know, how are you going to manage that? And then the other half of that is, I did a quick look. Natural gas, methane, is way under 1% of our ground fleet. Are you really just trying to capture too small a market, and are you looking at other markets through just say IRA and other options to really grow the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at renewable natural gas almost as an additive, you can place that molecule into nearly any kind of transport system to lower the carbon intensity of that transport system, right? So whether that's marine, whether that's heavy haul transport, by offering a lower carbon intensive fuel, that's where we see the benefit. I do agree is, you know, being, you know, working for Shell, obviously, you know, we're very familiar with methane and how the pipeline system works. I mean, we operate pipelines across the United States. So, you know, fugitive emissions are very important to us. Reducing those is key because, you know, when you have that, that's money out the door. And that's how we look at it is anytime you see a flare, you're losing money. So we don't want that. We don't want to lose methane from a leaky reactor. We don't want a digester, we call it a reactor, but we don't want a leak coming out of one of our pipes. We don't want it leaking on the pipeline because at the end of the day, that's just lost revenue.
So what I'd add is actually in California, we're not allowed, in the San Joaquin Valley, we're not allowed to have flares because the air pollution is so bad in the Valley Basin. And so the good thing for us is our digesters have about 3 to 5 days worth of storage. So if there's a down plant, we're hardly ever venting. And like Jesse said, venting is just lost revenue. And so we do leak detection ourselves. I think we've worked with others in the UC system to do some tests on leak detection and things like that. So hardly ever any leaks. We do a really good job of getting everything to the pipeline. Yeah, that's what I'd add.
Yeah. I think we've got a question back there with Baz.
Hi, Bass Hargrove with the Nature Conservancy, and thanks you guys for coming today. I'm really learning a lot. Question for Jesse. So, with Shell's $200 million investment, what does that translate to in terms of climate mitigation and you know, how many tons of carbon?
Yeah. So if you look at so these dairy digester projects will produce roughly in the neighborhood of 350 MMBTU, 350,000 MMBTU a year, right? So if you put that into a transport fuel, whether you sell it into a heavy hauler, you're reducing those CO2 emissions by 60% if you just look at it, a diesel truck to a CNG truck. Are you talking about what are we decarbonizing from the dairy?
Yeah, just overall with your investment, like how many tons of CO2 equivalents are we, removing from Idaho's overall, pie chart of emissions?
Boy, I don't know if I could answer that question because, I mean, if you're looking at the whole Idaho system, that's I couldn't comment on that. But if I just look at the emissions from the dairy that we're reducing those emissions by capturing that, and it, boy, I don't want to misquote. I'll have to get back to you on that number. But yeah, so I mean, it's all about the methane destruction, right? And so by capturing the methane, destroying the methane, that is really the key. But I don't want to misquote a figure.
I think I might be able to help here because with CalBio and our 54 operating projects in California, I'd have to double check with our CFO and our finance team. So take this with a grain of salt, but I think we've invested somewhere between $400 and $500 million in the state. So like I said, I have to double check that with my finance team. But for us, that's led to 1.2 million metric tons of CO2e reductions. Another really cool fact that we just started talking about, because we're a company of about 100 employees, so it's like 12,000 metric tons per employee.
Well, and I will say, California, the investment that the state has made in dairy digesters and in dairy technologies is about 2% of the investment. And they've gotten 29% of the reductions at a state level with 2% of the investment going to dairy projects. So the bang for the buck on these digester projects is absolutely there. So gentleman up front in the cowboy hat had a question.
Yes, thank you. This is very informative. As you can see, I appreciate a dairyman asking a beef guy, letting him have the floor for a minute, so I appreciate that a lot. Could you restate the minimum size of the dairy operations that Shell now has these digesters working? And then also the beef part of it is the finishing operations. Is there any exploration into CAFO's beef finishing feedlots that might work? And let's see, I had one more question. Maybe that's enough for now. I better not push it with my friends in the dairy business. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, all of our animals take a career change, so we're all friends.
They kind of end up in the same place, don't they?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so our investments in nature energy have shown us you can do it with 25 to 50 dairies that can have as few as 300 cows. It all depends on the amount of feedstock that you're able to get. And so we here in Idaho, we've partnered with the Betancourt dairies, and they have a significant amount of cattle, 20,000 head or so, right? And so we've looked at opportunities smaller than that. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to be very successful at building small projects.
Could I follow that up just a little bit? Could you, what was the term of the contract with the farmer that we had?
So the question was, what was the term of the contract with Betancourt Dairies?
Yeah, so it's a 50-year agreement.
So I'd like to add some flavor to that too. For us, and our typically we call them lease and feedstock agreements, and we've actually been able to have almost the same lease and feedstock agreement with all of our different dairy partners, at least in California. And they're, I think, 25-year agreements with an initial term and then options to extend and things like that. And both of us have to be hitting certain criteria to make those extensions happen. But you're really looking for long-term viability because these are big investments, and so it takes some time to hit the rates of return that everyone's looking for and stuff like that. And as far as opportunities for beef cattle, there is some opportunities on feedlots across the country. You almost need even more cows on the feedlot side just because the baseline's not there. A lot of them are raised in open lots, and so the manure is not ending up in an anaerobic environment where you have a really low carbon intensity score. But there is some opportunity out there. We've actually built one digester project for a calf raising feedlot in California, and we're under construction on a second one for them. It's kind of cool because they raise a lot of the calves for the dairies in the area. They also I think they also have a cow-calf operation there. Yeah, I think that's what I'd add.
Does the income fluctuate on those contracts year to year?
It all depends. Some developers offer kind of a fixed price to the dairy farmer. For us, we basically split the bottom line. So when credit market prices go up, it's a win for both of us. When they go down, it's a loss for both of us. But so far, we haven't ever been that far down to where there's no cash flows. So things have been pretty good and things have been successful.
Yeah, maybe Rick can add. So ours is pay the dairymen up front, take all the risk on the back end. But as I would say for also the feedlots, what the challenge there is really the anaerobic digestion process works in a slurry. And so you're having to find additional waste streams that provide that moisture content to really get that slurry mix to make the bugs happy.
So, and to maybe go back to your size question, projects that have been developed in the last few years in Idaho, the smallest dairy herd size is 7,000 cows in a freestall operation. We just don't generate enough slurry manure and consistent slurry manure in our open lots to make an Idaho open lot work for a digester project today. So it's definitely right now a technology for the biggest of the big.
I'd like to add on the size too. But for us, I think our largest project in California is about 10,000 milking cows, and our smallest are around 800 milking cows. And the 800 ones are tough, but what makes it possible for those is when we're developing a cluster of dairy digesters, and a lot of these dairies are neighboring to each other. If they're right along the biogas line that we plan on building, and if they already have an existing separation system, and we can build a project, maybe apply for a grant at the USDA level or CDFA level to help subsidize that project and make it happen.
So we are getting to the point where we need to wrap this up, but do want to give each of you a chance to offer some final thoughts. And maybe if you could, you know, Western Governors Association works on policy. So if there's anything you think this organization might be able to do to better the environment that y'all work within, maybe, you know, kind of couch your closing comments in what Western Governors might be able to do to help you and your business out. So Jess, we'll kick it off with you.
Sure. No, I think we've felt very supported by the Western Governors, just in general. I believe, you know, our advocacy and policy group has a very close relationship with this organization as well as the governors themselves. You know, I think at a federal level there's probably more work to do, but I think in the western states people are doing a good job about finding solutions that work for not just the dairymen or not just for big corporations. I think we're working together to find solutions that work across kind of the whole value chain to reduce carbon emissions.
So first off, I'll just thank Governor Little for hosting us in the beautiful state of Idaho, and thank Governor Gordon for really driving this initiative. And for me, I think the best thing that we can do from a policy perspective is we need to maintain avoided methane with dairy farms and other farm families, and we need to increase opportunities to these farm families by generating some of our own programs in other states.
Well, I haven't been as good at these, but I'm going to read what they said to me here. This has come from one of my experts in my space, which is not dairy digesters. The biggest clean energy policy that can have an immediate impact is a clean fuel standard. Most of the focus typically is on electricity front, where there are renewable portfolio standards that exclusively focus on electrify. The implementing a technology-agnostic clean fuel system would encourage development of the most economic solution, which oftentimes is a biogas-based solution. And then I thought what was interesting, now after I've been through this with you great Americans, is the next question was what policy or funding mechanisms that can help encourage digester development, my guy, because we're really concerned about the small farms. I mean, I've learned we can handle the big boys, but the little ones. And he says small farms can still be viable when there is a state-sponsored clean fuel program. And on-site, and I know I heard this, you like California doing their thing, and I got that, but on-site vehicle, and we want to sell on-site vehicle solutions such as our platforms make sense for small farms rather than on-site injection. That's what I was told.
Well, join me in thanking the panelists here today.